I didn't walk away from love because I stopped believing in it. I walked away because I stopped believing in the version of love I was being asked to live. Love as performance, love as compliance, love as self erasure dressed up as loyalty. In 3 years, I went through 5 relationships. Not the kind that end with shouting matches or a spectacular betrayal. Most of them ended the way a rope frays, quietly, gradually, one strand at a time. No fireworks, no dramatic exits. Just that slow, unmistakable moment when you realize you're not building a life with someone. You're auditioning for a role in theirs. You're not sharing intimacy. You're maintaining an image of it. People told me I was hard to love, that I overthought, that I expected too much. But the truth is uglier and simpler. I had become easy to leave because I made it effortless for someone to take me for granted. I smiled through things that hurt. I nodded through apologies that didn't change behavior. I called my silence maturity. I called my self abandonment commitment. And every time I handed over a piece of myself, it didn't come back in the ways that mattered. I didn't leave because I found someone better. I left because I realized I didn't know who I was without someone else's expectations hanging over me like a shadow. I was living under invisible rules. Be agreeable, don't be complicated, don't ask for too much, don't make them uncomfortable, don't be needy. I was trying so hard to be chosen that I forgot to choose myself. At 32, I sat alone in a diner at 2 in the morning, scrolling through old photos. Birthdays, vacations, holidays. In every picture, I was there technically, smiling, standing close, but my eyes looked like I was half gone, like I was watching my life from a distance. That's when it hit me. At some point, I became a ghost in my own story, and nobody even noticed because I kept showing up on time and keeping the peace. No one warns you how quiet the end of love can be. They warn you about heartbreak like it's a storm, loud, obvious, dramatic. But sometimes it's not a storm. Sometimes it's a weight, a heaviness that sits on your chest like breathing through wet cloth. You go to work, you answer texts, you pay bills, and inside, something keeps folding in on itself. And then comes the part nobody talks about, honestly, the pressure. Not always direct, not always cruel, but persistent. The way society treats your relationship status like a score, like proof of value, like if you're alone, you must be missing something. My mother asked if I'd given up. Friends treated it like a phase, a temporary malfunction. Social media fed me curated couples, anniversary captions, proposals filmed from the right angle. It's not just romance, it's a culture of display. And if you don't have someone to display, people assume you're losing. But I started paying attention. Behind every perfect story, there was often a negotiation nobody posted. The swallowed opinion, the softened ambition, the humor used as a shield, the needs edited down to something more convenient. I saw women my age smiling through weddings like they were outrunning a clock. I saw men in their 40s performing contentment while drowning in marriages that felt like rented homes. Places they lived in, but never truly owned. And something in me said, clearly, I don't want a home that isn't mine to build. The turning point wasn't an argument. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't some cinematic moment where someone says the one unforgivable line. It was smaller than that, which is why it was bigger than that. It was the morning I woke up and didn't think of anyone but myself and didn't feel guilty. No apology for sleeping late. No mental rehearsing of explanations. No scanning my phone like I owed someone immediate access to my attention. I made an entire pot of steel cut oats just because I liked the smell. I took a train with no plan and got off at a station I'd never heard of. No one knew where I was. No one needed to. And for the first time in years, I felt like a person, not a partner, not a caretaker, not an emotional employee. A person. I didn't walk away from love. I walked toward myself. And in the quiet that followed, I heard things I hadn't allowed myself to hear. The rhythm of my own breath, the weight of my own thoughts, the steady hum of someone finally living at home inside his own life. That quiet wasn't emptiness, it was space. And space is where truth shows up. Here's what I had to admit. I thought love was something you earned by enduring. I thought being a good man meant staying calm, staying loyal, staying silent when you were hurt. I confused tolerance with strength. I believed that if I could just be easy, love would stay. If I could shrink my needs, smooth my edges, keep things simple, I'd be rewarded with commitment. At 16, I thought intensity was romance. Late night calls, constant contact, that chest tightening urgency that feels like fate when you're young. At 22, I confused obsession with devotion. I thought it was normal for your identity to blur into someone else's, for birthdays to become obligations instead of celebrations, for your time to stop being your own. Every new relationship started like redemption, like finally, someone sees me. Finally, I'm safe. Finally, I can exhale. But the endings had a pattern, not explosions, withdrawals, not fights, distance. The kind of silence that grows teeth. The kind where someone stays physically present but emotionally gone. They're there, but you can feel the absence sitting between you like a third person at the table. I dated all types. People who needed me to be their muse. People who wanted the benefits of a partner before they'd built any stability in their own life. People who didn't want connection so much as emotional labor, a reliable place to unload, a steady hand to regulate their chaos. And because I was capable, because I was loyal, because I knew how to listen, I became useful. Useful is dangerous because it can look like love from far away. I learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. I became fluent in mood shifts. I could tell from a single exhale whether I was about to spend the night comforting someone, apologizing for something I didn't do, or walking on glass to avoid a storm. I missed family holidays because someone told me it would mean more if you were here. I canceled therapy sessions to accommodate someone else's emotions. I stopped reading books I loved because they were labeled selfish, like my mind was only allowed to exist in service of the relationship. I changed what I enjoyed because it was easier than defending it. One compromise doesn't feel like a tragedy, it feels like maturity, but compromises compound. They stack up until you wake up one day and your life doesn't sound like you anymore. By 30, I had mapped the terrain of other people's hearts, what calms them, what triggers them, what they fear, what they need. Yet I had no map of my own. I could tell you what everyone else wanted from me, but I couldn't tell you what I wanted from my life without checking if it inconvenienced someone. And that's when the ugly concept revealed itself: emotional debt. A lot of people build intimacy like a loan. You give, you listen, you show up, you sacrifice, you carry weight that isn't yours because you think that's what love is. But if the other person isn't also building, if they're only withdrawing, you don't have a relationship. You have an account draining in slow motion. And one day, the borrower disappears, and you're left holding emptiness, wondering if you're the kind of man who gives until there's nothing left. What no one tells you is that many relationships don't fail because of hatred. They fail because of erosion. Water through a cracked foundation. At first, you think the fatigue is normal, the late night discussions that never resolve, the apologies you don't mean, the constant recalibration of your emotions to match someone else's rhythm. One partner told me I was too sensitive when I was hurt by neglect. Another dismissed my anxiety as drama while canceling plans for the third time in the month. So I started measuring my worth in what I could endure, how long I could wait for a text, how many days I could silence my needs before they became too much, how many times I could accept the bare minimum and call it love. I learned to read silence as language. A partner turning away when I spoke about my dreams, not with anger, but with distance, said more than any argument ever could. Another time, after months of planning a trip, someone canceled and said they needed space to grow. 4 days later, I saw the photos. The same kind of trip, the same city I'd always wanted to visit, just with someone else. When I asked about it, I was called paranoid, oversensitive. The problem, it wasn't always loud cruelty. Sometimes it was systematic distortion, a slow rewriting of reality where your instincts become evidence of your instability, where your needs become proof of your selfishness. Therapy gave it a name, but the name wasn't the point. The point was the cost. I wasn't just tired, I was hollowed out. I had been spending years paying with emotional labor, listening as currency, patience as payment, forgiveness as a subscription plan. I buffered fears, managed moods, absorbed stress. And the moment I needed support, the room got quiet. Not because people didn't care, necessarily, but because I had trained them to expect that I would be fine. I had built a reputation for being the guy who can handle it, and that reputation became my cage. The worst part wasn't heartbreak. It was realizing this wasn't a streak of bad luck. It was a pattern I kept choosing because I believed love required self-erasure. I believed peace was something you earn by being good enough. So I asked myself a question that changed everything. What if I don't owe anyone my exhaustion? What if peace isn't a prize someone hands you when you prove your value? What if peace is a right you claim simply because you exist? Though I didn't realize how far I'd erased myself until I stood in front of a mirror and didn't recognize what I'd become. The face was mine. The details were mine. But the energy wasn't. My opinions had been sanded down. My passions labeled inconvenient. My edges softened into something more manageable. I stopped creating because someone called it self-indulgent. I canceled hikes because someone said nature was boring. I deleted a blog I'd written for years because someone didn't like that I had a voice they couldn't control. There were no explosions, no shouting, just quiet. Absences. The books I didn't read, the music I didn't play, the friends I stopped seeing because they're a bad influence or they make you anxious, as if my world needed to be smaller to be acceptable. I became a reflection. I mirrored tastes, opinions, silences. I learned to nod, even when I disagreed, because peace was cheaper than truth. And when the relationship ended, I didn't feel the kind of grief people expect. I felt disorientation, like I'd been dropped into my own life without a map. Friends asked, "What do you want to do this weekend?" And I stared at them like they'd asked me to solve a riddle. My wants had been buried under years of adaptation. I called my mother one night and broke down, not because I was lonely, but because I didn't recognize my own laughter anymore. That's a different kind of pain. It's not missing another person, it's missing yourself. Society kept repeating the same line, in different forms. You need someone to be whole. But what if wholeness isn't filling a void? What if wholeness is remembering what was always there before you started bargaining pieces of yourself away. The first time I bought a canvas again, I didn't make anything impressive. I just let paint drip. I let my hands move without judging the result. And for the first time in years, I didn't check to see if anyone was watching. I didn't look for approval. I just created, for me. That's how you come back, not in a grand transformation, but in small acts of ownership. You start doing things because you like them. You start choosing what you actually want. You stop asking permission to exist, and then you face the judgment, the subtle stuff, the questions that are really accusations. You'll hear it at family dinners and weddings, wrapped in concern. So, are you seeing anyone? You'll see the way conversations shift when you say you're not dating. You'll feel the unspoken assumption that solitude is failure, that singleness is a waiting room, that if you're alone, you must be incomplete. Even the language is loaded. People say you're still single, as if you're stuck, as if you're behind, as if a relationship is graduation and everything else is remedial. But I started noticing something. The people who quietly thrive don't announce it. They don't justify it. They just live. They own their homes. They take trips alone. They build careers without asking a partner's permission to grow. They create. They train. They learn. They breathe. Their identity isn't negotiated. And I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of disappointing people who had built a script for my life. Here's what I know now. Most of society's pressure isn't loud. It's silence. It's the pause after you say you're not settling down. It's the sideways glance when you don't mention a partner at work. It's the assumption that solitude is absence, when it can actually be the presence of something more profound, choice. I once boarded a plane alone, on a whim, just to watch the northern lights. Nobody called me brave. Nobody even noticed, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The power of a life unnegotiated. And I'm going to say this in a way men understand. There is a difference between being alone and being at peace. Being alone is a fact. Being at peace is a skill. The end of my last relationship didn't come with a slammed door. It came in a bathroom at 3 in the morning, standing in the dark, holding a toothbrush like it was the only thing in that house that still belonged to me. 3 years of shrinking. 3 years of pretending I didn't notice my laughter getting smaller. 3 years of my passions being labeled too intense. My needs being treated like problems. My silence being mistaken for agreement. I had loved them, but I had not loved myself enough to stop betraying my own instincts. So I left, not with rage, not with blame, with clarity. I deleted the dating apps. I blocked the number without reopening the same conversation for the 100th time. I gave back the key. I stopped checking social media, not because I didn't care, but because I cared about the one thing I'd been neglecting, my sanity. People chase closure like it's a sacred object. Sometimes closure is a luxury. Sometimes certainty is more important. The first week was brutal, not dramatic, not cinematic, brutal in the quiet way. The mind starts negotiating. What if you made a mistake? What if you're unlovable? What if this is it? I miss the comfort of someone else's rhythm, not the relationship itself, but the familiarity. Men don't talk enough about how addictive familiarity can be, even when it's unhealthy. Your nervous system learns a pattern, tension, relief, tension, relief, and you start mistaking the cycle for love. When the cycle stops, your body calls it loneliness, even if your mind knows you're finally safe. Then something surprising happened. I began to notice my own rhythm again. I slept without checking my phone. I sang off key in the kitchen. I bought groceries based on what I actually wanted, not what would keep someone else satisfied. I noticed sunlight on apples in a store and realized I'm here, fully here. That's when I wrote something down that I still carry with me. I am not choosing loneliness. I am choosing myself. And that wasn't a motivational line. It was an inventory of reality. The nights were the hardest, not because I was empty, but because silence has memory. Silence remembers what you used to share. The warmth of another body, the routine, the shorthand language between two people. I lay awake, hearing the hum of the refrigerator, the wind against the window, the creak of the floorboards, sounds I used to tune out, now loud. But instead of filling the silence with distraction, I started filling it with restoration. I read books I'd bought and never opened. I walked alone at dawn, not to clear my head, but to hear my own thoughts without them being edited. I signed up for a pottery class, not to meet anyone, but to feel something real in my hands. I trained, not to impress, not to compete, but to feel embodied, grounded, capable, like I lived inside my own skin again. Doubt still whispered, "You'll never find this again. No one will want what's left. You're behind." But I kept showing up, not to a relationship, to myself. And that's where something shifted. Loneliness stopped being a verdict and started being information. Loneliness is not proof you're failing. Sometimes it's proof you're healing. When you stop using other people to numb your own emptiness, you feel what's been there all along. That feeling can be uncomfortable, but discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is the beginning of truth. Freedom didn't arrive with a trumpet. It arrived in small revolutions. The morning I woke up and didn't check who was texting first. The afternoon I changed my mind mid-plan because I felt like it. The weekend I drove to the coast without telling anyone because I didn't have to justify it. The first time I said no without explaining it like a lawyer. No more negotiating my schedule. No more apologizing for needing quiet. No more pretending I liked something just to keep the peace. My choices stopped being filtered through someone else's comfort. I started investing in myself the way disciplined men invest in what matters, consistently, without drama. Therapy became non-negotiable, not because I was broken, but because I was done living on autopilot. I wanted to understand my patterns, the parts of me that kept choosing the same kind of person in a different body, the parts of me that confused caretaking with love. I got serious about my health, and not to chase an image, but to build a foundation. Sleep, nutrition, movement, strength, not vanity, stability. I learned how to be alone without being reckless. That's important. Some men confuse solitude with isolation and call it independence. But real independence isn't hiding. It's being able to stand on your own without turning your life into a bunker. So I reconnected with friends, not as a third wheel, not as someone half present, but as myself. I volunteered. I mentored. I showed up in ways I couldn't before because I wasn't leaking energy into a relationship that constantly demanded proof. And here's something people get wrong about single men. They call us selfish. But the truth is, I give more now than I did in most relationships because I'm no longer giving to be needed. I'm giving because I have something real to offer. I listen without resentment. I help without keeping score. I show up without performing. The myth that I'll regret this later, I already lived that regret. Years of stifled joy, half-lived dreams, swallowing my voice so the relationship could stay comfortable. Regret wasn't being alone. Regret was abandoning myself while calling it love. Yes, holidays can be quiet, but I learned to make them mine. I built rituals, friendsgiving with people who also chose their own path, simple mornings with coffee and a book, New Year's Eve walks under streetlights, letters to my younger self. Not because I'm trying to cope, but because life isn't a waiting room. It's happening. There are nights I still feel the ache of companionship. I'm not above it. I'm not numb. I'm human. Sometimes the world is heavy and you want a hand on your shoulder. Sometimes you want someone to witness your day, to laugh with, to sit with in the quiet. But now, I don't panic when that feeling shows up. I don't rush to fix it with attention. I don't download an app and start bargaining again. I sit with it. I let it pass through me without controlling me. Because I learned something men aren't always taught. You can feel a need without surrendering your standards. Solitude is not the opposite of connection. It's the foundation of authentic connection. When you know how to be with yourself, you stop asking another person to rescue you from your own life. You stop turning love into a life raft. You approach relationships as a choice, not a necessity. That's the difference between wanting someone and needing someone. Needing is desperation wearing a suit. Wanting is clarity with a steady hand. And that brings me to the most important line I can give you. I didn't walk away from love. I walked back to myself. Choosing solitude wasn't rejection, it was reverence. Reverence for the parts of me that had been drowned out by compromise. Reverence for the quiet voice that kept saying, "This isn't right." Even when I tried to be the good guy, the easy guy, the one who never asks for too much. I used to think love required surrender. I was wrong. Real love, steady love, mature love doesn't demand you forget your name. If your relationship leaves you quieter, smaller, exhausted, even if it's wrapped in kindness, pause. Not to punish, not to threaten, not to play games. Pause to take inventory. Ask yourself, do I feel respected here or just tolerated? Do I feel seen or just used? Do I feel more like myself or less? Am I expanding or am I shrinking? Your happiness isn't a luxury. It isn't selfish. It's the foundation. No one can build it for you. No partner can compensate for the way you avoid your own truth. No romance can substitute for self-respect. I'm not anti-relationship. I'm anti-self-sacrifice disguised as virtue. I'm pro-wakefulness. I'm pro-ownership. I'm pro-belonging to yourself so deeply that nobody gets access to your life unless they can honor it. Maybe I'll love again. Maybe I won't. Either way, what comes next won't be negotiated in the dark. It won't demand that I become smaller to be kept. It won't require me to trade my peace for someone else's comfort. If love returns, it will meet me as I am, whole, steady, awake. And if it doesn't, I'll still be here, living a life that belongs to me. If you're listening to this and you feel alone in your decision, let me say it plainly. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are becoming. You are rebuilding. You are remembering. The world will keep telling you to settle, to pair up, to fill the silence, to accept whatever comes so you can say you have someone. But the deepest truths don't come as announcements. They come as whispers, in the breath before sleep, in the quiet after a long day, in the moment you realize you're done, waiting to be rescued. You were never incomplete. You were just living by someone else's definition of what a complete life looks like. And the most radical act of love isn't chasing another person. Sometimes it's refusing to give your heart away again until you've learned how to stand beside yourself without flinching, without apologizing, without disappearing. Thank you for listening.